Today, we're going to discuss how conspiracies about 5G may have gone a little too far, seeing that they aren't backed by any evidence whatsoever.
Way to spoil it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Just Nah Science Podcast. Each episode, we debunk ridiculous yet common science misconceptions we find online and get just a little salty about them. I'm your favorite science teacher, Lauren.
And I'm your phone service repair guy, Nick. Make sure you're home between 2 a.m. and 7 p.m. all week, because that's when I'll drop by. Before we get started, if you like science, you might be a nerd. And if you are a nerd, you probably like things like Pokemon and Lord of the Rings, so you should come check out our Twitch channel. Twitch is totally free, and you can watch us record each podcast episode live before they're released, and then we open the floor to our viewers to talk about whatever they want. And it usually turns into nerdy things like sword fighting, Lord of the Rings, and some other nerdy-ass topics. You can find the link in the episode description.
So 5G is the next or fifth generation of wireless network and seeks to improve on 4G LTE, which stands for long-term evolution.
If you've ever seen a cell phone tower, you'll notice they're quite large. 4G uses a specific frequency of waves that can travel well over long distances, which is why you don't need a lot of cell towers to get good signals from 4G.
But 5G, on the other hand, is a higher frequency, and this higher frequency doesn't travel as far. So therefore, in order to get good service, you need to be close to the antenna and have more of them. But when you get good service, speed tests show that double or even triple the download speeds are for 5G compared to 4G.
The problem is 5G, in addition to not traveling very far, can be interfered with pretty easily. The speed test results are dramatically different and are far slower, even though it still outpaces 4G if you're like behind a wall or there's like trees blocking your direct line of sight from the antenna to wherever you are.
Or Nick standing in your way.
Wow. Oh my.
Just kidding.
Okay. Wow.
JK, I love you.
The solution to this is, at the moment, to have 5G antennas be placed closer to us and in higher numbers so you can maximize coverage and still maintain good distance to the antennas. Imagine like if you have antennas all scattered all over the place, no matter which direction you go, you'll still be connected to 2 or 3 of them at a good distance, because when you get too far away from one, there'll be another one there to pick up that signal or give the signal. So if you live in a 5G city, you may have noticed white rectangular blocks on top of light posts, electrical poles, or other fixed structures, and that is likely a 5G antenna.
But it's this closer proximity and higher density that I think has people really concerned about the health and environmental effects. But before we go any further, we definitely need to get a little nerdy and talk about the electromagnetic spectrum and radio waves just kind of briefly. So I suggest you may want to pause the episode and pull up an image of the electromagnetic spectrum. You can find a link in the episode description, or you can easily Google it.
The first thing I want to point out is that you may see some text that says non-ionizing and ionizing radiation. We don't need to discuss what the difference between them is, but for now, suffice it to say that ionizing radiation is potentially harmful, while non-ionizing radiation is considered safe. So, ionizing...
If you see that, yeah, just know.
Ionizing, hazardous, non-ionizing, non-hazardous. That's how you can easily remember that. The second thing to look at is the squiggly line. That is the waveform or the frequency of different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, and the tighter the waves, the higher the energy. Very tight waves, such as gamma and X-rays, can be really harmful.
Right, like that's why whenever you go to the dentist or you're getting X-rays, they usually put a lead vest over you, so you minimizes the amount of X-ray exposure. That's why the tech always steps out of the room when they do it, because they can't be like repeatedly exposed to it. Gamma radiation, comes straight out of the sun.
Makes you the Hulk.
Fusion.
Makes you, that's what he was exposed to.
Yeah, and that's what was given off in Chernobyl. Like, that's some serious shit. right? So that's one extreme end, very harmful. But if you notice in whatever image you're looking at, or maybe you just know that sunlight and the visible light spectrum is a higher frequency than things like TVs, cell phones, computers, and 5G. So we're exposed to sunlight and that visible light all the time. And if you even look at some more detailed images of the spectrum, some of them will list humans on there, and they're often listed as giving off higher wavelength frequencies than radio towers, usually in the form of infrared rays, like heat given off by thermal bodies.
So if you're concerned 5G is going to give you cancer, do not cuddle with anyone.
Yeah. You want to find a nice hole in the ground, never see anybody, come near anybody, because we are dangerous.
Another concern is that 5G will not immediately replace 4G, but the 5G will be used in addition to 4G. It'll be like a supplement for those moments, or when you lose 5G connection, you'll still have that 4G connection so that you don't lose service entirely. It will take a lot of money and a ton of time to fully upgrade the country to only use 5G networks, so in that time, 4G is still needed. On top of that, even if the entire country was ready to go, you still have to get people to upgrade their phones to allow the use of 5G. That's right.
I'm guilty.
Depending on the model of phone you have right now, you may not even be able to connect to 5G, even if you climbed on top of a 5G antenna, which, by the way, do not do.
Isn't my phone not 5G capable?
Your phone is not. I have a 5G phone, and I have yet to grow a third or fourth ear. So that's good, I guess.
Well, who knows? You also got the COVID vaccine, so we wouldn't know where that ear.
Vaccine.
Oh, that's right, you didn't.
Yeah.
Just me.
I'm hoping that when I get the COVID vaccine, my cell service goes up dramatically.
Could you imagine?
People are concerned about the potential synergistic effects of 4G and 5G, and I always feel like a middle manager whenever I say things like synergy. It's like trying to hype people up. Anyway. People are concerned about the potential synergistic effects of 4G and 5G radiation, the close proximity to 5G antennas, and the need for more of them. And let's point out, honestly, a lot of people just don't like the way they look.
Let's just be real. People are racist against these 5G antennas.
No, seriously, there's been some lawsuits because there are antennas like several feet, 20, 30 feet away from like people's houses or bedrooms, and they cite that it's dangerous and unsightly.
Yeah, they did the same thing with wind turbines,
which is ridiculous. Wind turbines are nice.
I think they're pretty.
So there was a poll of about 1,000 people from 2018 where 1/3 of the participants believed that cell signal causes brain cancer.
Yeesh, that's kind of high. But like, also it makes me think, like, okay, how many of these people were smokers? Just saying. I
have an answer for that.
What?
According to a 2019 CDC survey, I think it's, I'm trying to remember, I think it's like 14% of Americans.
14% Americans are smokers?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, of these 1,000 people polled, like, people are so concerned about cell signals. Meanwhile, they're like puffing cigarettes, they're vaping. Like, I feel you're much more likely to have your health affected by like individual actions rather than like cell signal and radio waves.
That is a good question. Does that survey from the CDC, does that include things like vaping? Because probably not. 14% of people, I feel like, is pretty low for smoking and vaping.
What high school kid is taking these CDC surveys? None, but a lot of them are vaping.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. What age group is this? I don't know.
So yeah, it's just like it's so interesting. Like, people are very quick to point the finger at things that are out of their control, right? And I get that. Things that are out of your control tend to be a little bit more scary. We don't know a lot about. But if you're like, I choose to smoke or I choose to eat a poor diet.
Oh, again, that's the second one today.
They'll accept those risks, like, without blinking.
I like cinnamon rolls. Leave me alone.
But anyway, a separate poll from February 2020 that looked at privacy says, okay, hang on, I gotta redo that. So anyway, we looked at a poll from February 2020 that looked at privacy. And I know we're talking about science and health, but protected health information and privacy, like HIPAA laws, are kind of still in our realm. So considering people using cell service to talk about their health, it's really not that far-fetched. So only 20% of Americans are okay with less privacy but faster internet. And 33% of Americans say that they trust the government to safeguard their privacy over private companies. And I just had to bring this up because it just made me think of this, and it just happened to us yesterday. Speaking of cell phone privacy, we were in a store yesterday looking for possibly getting a new humidifier. And they had some really funky looking ones that were really cute. One of them looked like a little glass house. That was the humidifier. And we were talking about, should we get it? We decided not to. Kid you not, just a couple hours later, I'm scrolling on my phone. Meanwhile, I've never seen those types of humidifiers in my life. I'm scrolling through my phone, and what do I see? An ad for glass-looking house humidifiers. I couldn't believe it.
I'm sure every single person listening to this right now has had an experience similar to this, and it has to do with the agreements that we make with Google and Apple. Like if you use Siri or you use your Google Home, when you sign up, you agree that they can use your data for advertising purposes, and I think there's a way to turn it off or like turn off those kind of ads. But
then it's whatever. Like, I do like what I see on the ad.
Yeah, it's like I don't remember talking about this, but I guess I must have. Like, this is pretty cool.
And I just keep thinking like, if there's something like I'm trying to picture for like a decoration for the house, all I have to do is like describe out loud what I'm looking for, and then I will see ads suddenly for it.
Anyway, let's get back on topic. A big area of discussion in the past year was that 5G is somehow connected to the novel coronavirus that causes COVID-19. And a lot of people say that 5G, and I shouldn't say a lot of people, some people say that 5G created COVID, which is so fun. And others argue that 5G weakens our immune system so that we can be infected by COVID-19 easier. I tried to find some tweets of people connecting 5G and COVID, but honestly, at least on my search, it was mostly people being funny and sarcastic. Yeah, I could have gone to Facebook, but I was not ready for that mess.
Hang on, let me check my uncle's page real quick.
I'm sure there's something. But I guess we can kind of get into finally debunking this. Let's start with COVID and 5G. 5G does not create viruses. Like, come on, that's silly. How could you even think that?
I know.
It's a cell phone network.
It's just a severe disconnection as to like what 5G is and what viruses are and how they do not connect at all.
Seriously.
So we did some research on just looking through the World Health Organization's website. So the WHO has listed 5G networks.
The WHO listed it? Too easy. I'm sorry.
So the HWO, I'll say it like that, has listed 5G networks as a potential carcinogenic, meaning something that may cause cancer.
It's placed in the same category as coffee and pickles.
Yes. Okay, so it's kind of like California. They label everything as possibly carcinogenic, and it's literally everything. So that just puts it a little bit of perspective. So this is straight from their website. HWO said, quote, approximately 25,000 articles have been published over the past 30 years. Despite the feeling of some people that more research needs to be done, scientific knowledge in this area is now more extensive than most chemicals. So based on a recent in-depth review of the scientific literature, the HWO concluded that current evidence does not confirm the existence of any health consequences from exposure to low-level electromagnetic fields. Quote,
Let's just talk about the claim that the body is weakened by 5G and allows for COVID-19 infections. And this may be true if we were seeing large groups of people becoming sick with a variety of diseases at higher rates. Not to mention that there are a lot of places in the country and also the world that don't have access to 5G, but are still getting sick with COVID at incredibly high rates. So the two just don't work.
But what also blows my mind is that these people who are saying 5G causes COVID, in the next breath will also say that COVID doesn't exist. So which is it?
Also, they're tweeting that COVID, or they're putting up YouTube videos, but no, I'm going to say that later. What am I doing?
I'm getting crazy.
There are a ton of potential bacterium that would get us sick if we had weakened immune systems. These are called opportunistic infections, and it's why people on long-term antibiotics are actually more prone to get infections. People receiving chemo or living with AIDS get infections that most people don't have to worry about. And I know this from personal experience. My brother, years ago, he had stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma. He's fine now. And at the time, we had to do things like give him injections for his immune system, and he had to get them weekly because the chemo and the radiation just destroy your immune system. So what happens is things like Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which is a type of bacteria that exists and would infect us and get us sick if we didn't have immune systems or a good functioning immune system, doesn't get us sick in humans. So you would see if just a total weakening or dampening of our immune system function, you would see increases in things like opportunistic infections like Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which you could identify because of the bluish green type of pus that's produced.
Right. And so if also you have to think about this, like if there was a mass reduction in our immune system's functioning, it wouldn't be to a specific virus either. Like Nick's saying, you would see all these opportunistic infections arising too. And you have to keep in mind that there are also other coronaviruses that get us sick. Like we've talked about this a lot. Like 30% of all colds you get are from coronaviruses. So the argument of, well, what if it's specific to coronavirus doesn't really hold.
And also, like, why would it be?
Yeah.
But that's, anyway. The last claim is that The last claim is that 5G causes cancer and we have to be worried. Remember how earlier we talked about 5G having really poor penetration and limited range? Well, that matters a lot in talking about the ability for it to cause cancer. The 5G has to penetrate our skin, which is a pretty good barrier, by the way, and get to our living cells. Remember, the sun has stronger wavelength, or it has more energy than 5G. We're exposed to the sun all the time. But anyway, cancer caused by radiation is done so by high energy interactions that cause the DNA molecule to break and reconnect improperly. It messes with the molecular bonds, and this is the same mechanism for how skin cancer develops. Mm-hmm. We talk about what's called a thymine dimer. Essentially, radiation from the sun in the form of ultraviolet radiation causes one of our DNA base pairs called thymine to break from its partner, adenine, and bond with itself in a different orientation. This new bonding pattern makes it so the DNA can't be read properly during cell division, causing uncontrolled cell division, which is cancer. 5G radiation, which again, looking at the electromagnetic spectrum, is below the level of radiation from the sun. So, and it's also not even strong enough to break apart DNA, according to some studies.
Right. And if you look at that spectrum as well, microwaves are higher up on the spectrum. We use microwaves all the time. And yes, I'm sure they put some like protective barriers in microwaves too. But, if it really was that serious, we wouldn't be allowed to have them in our homes and cook our food with them. And if you still think 5G is an issue in terms of radiation, then try cooking your chicken or your food with your cell phone and tell me how that goes.
I'm convinced there will be I'm sure the next year, a video of someone who does that test, and it's like, I took a piece of raw chicken and left it next to my cell phone all night. Let's see how it looks. And they pull
magically out a grilled chicken with grill marks.
Yeah, there's grill marks on the chicken, and it just makes you think of the steamed hams from The Simpsons. Like, you call them steamed hams, despite the fact that they are clearly grilled.
Oh man, now as we do this episode though, I'm thinking, man, in the beginning of the year when we talked about the electromagnetic spectrum, I should have taught it through this lens, like 5G and looking at the different wavelengths. Like I should have tapped into this to teach it. And I have to make me write this down so I remember for next year.
Okay.
But seriously though, Nick started to kind of talk about this before, but the funniest part about this whole thing to me is that the same concerns about 5G have been expressed with the rollout of 3G and even Wi-Fi. Yet there are Facebook groups, YouTube videos, people on Twitter that rely on this technology to spread their message that the technology they're actively using is hurting people.
It's so great.
If you thought that, you wouldn't be on social media, right? You wouldn't have a phone. Like if you like, but it's just funny to see like, well, you know, people are really into their phone, so they're not willing to give it up, but whatever. And there's no shortage of people taking advantage of these conspiracies, as you can find what's called Faraday cages being sold on Amazon.
I know it's coming, and I can't. It's too stupid.
So if you've never heard of Faraday cages, they are like these mesh metal cages that are used to block radiation from devices. And a lot of times they are used by like telephone pole workers so they don't get fried to a crisp for things. But people are buying them to place over their Wi-Fi routers to block 5G. The only problem here is that they work a little too good. So one item description, and if you look this up on Amazon now, you can literally see this. So one item description on Amazon literally reads, blocks about 90% of Wi-Fi router EMF. It tells you that. It blocks 90% of the Wi-Fi. And as suspected, there are some 1-star reviews that read like this, quote, the box does work at keeping radiation in, but also Wi-Fi will not work unless in the same room as router. It decreased my signal by 90%. Well, who could have seen that coming? These Faraday cages are actually doing their job.
What's even better is that 5G and Wi-Fi are not the same.
I know.
So people are putting this over their Wi-Fi routers, and it's not doing anything. Like, all right, I get it. You want to prevent radiation, whatever, from inside your house, but my God, that's not even what 5G is.
I know. So, and it literally says that Faraday cage blocks 5G, and then it's just...
I mean, it probably does. I don't think they're lying. That's like the person who sold, what is it, the new Xbox Series X or Xbox One X, whatever it is, the new Xbox. I don't know. Lauren won't let me get it, so I don't know what it is. They bought or they might have bought a PS5.
Yeah, it was a PS.
They bought a picture of a PS5 for $500. The description of the item said they were buying a photo of a PS5, but they didn't look. They just saw the option to buy a PS5 for $500. Didn't read, didn't pay attention. They bought it, and then when they got the picture, they tried to get a refund through eBay, and eBay was like, sorry, like they were clear about what they were selling.
I know, that's still very shisty. I
agree.
hate that.
I'm not saying they should have done it. I'm just saying,
but this thing too, like this particular Faraday cage was like $90. You know, not cheap. So they're definitely scamming people.
Yeah. They're playing on people's inability to either research or fear. Mostly, it's mostly fear, and it's messed up because in addition to scamming, you know what else isn't funny? The lengths people will go to stop 5G from rolling out.
Because of fear, right?
Like these cell phone towers in South Africa that were burned down due to misinformation about 5G, and the recent bombing at an AT&T transmission building in Nashville. So, you know, do we always have to ensure that technology isn't harming us or the environment? Absolutely. But until there's solid evidence that 5G or some other technology can harm us, I'm not really worried about it. And I'm willing to extend an olive branch. I'll acknowledge that there are some aspects of technology that aren't great for us. The claim that the close proximity of our cell phones to our heads causes cancer is something to be taken seriously. The addiction to our phones, the constant blue light affecting our sleep cycles, the stress and depression that children and teens face due to social media, that's all real, and we should 100% acknowledge it and do the best to mitigate hazards.
But things like being microchipped with a vaccine, 5G causing COVID, and other conspiracy theories that all seem to intertwine and connect somehow just ain't it.
And I want to focus or highlight on one research study that I'm sure people will use in support of 5G being hazardous. There was a study from 2018 that talked about how mice, or rats rather, that were exposed to RFR, radio frequency radiation, which is this kind of thing that you get from your cell phone, developed tumors. But if you read the study, the authors say, and I have it written down, so I need to pull it up.
I got it for you.
Oh, thank you. This is a direct quote from the article. It says, the exposures used in the study cannot be directly compared to the exposure humans experience when using a cell phone. In our studies, rats and mice received radio frequency radiation across their whole bodies. By contrast, people are mostly exposed in specific local tissues to where they hold their phone. In addition, the exposure levels and durations in our studies were greater than what people experience. End quote. And then it goes on to say that the lowest exposure level that was used in the study was equal to the maximum local tissue that's allowed for cell phone users. So the minimum exposure is the maximum we can get, which means every level of radiation afterwards is more than what we're getting. So, and then also you have to consider that it's not a direct comparison between mice and humans or rats and humans. Or, the barrier to getting into the skin or getting into living cells is different. If you're talking about brain tumors, things like the thickness of bone is different. So there's a lot of elements to
right. And
radiation.
Their body size in general is just
right.
smaller.
Yeah, so if you give a certain amount of radiation over a much smaller body and then give that same level of radiation over a much larger body, it's going to be different results. So when you're looking at radiation or medical biology or research, you have to be very careful. You can't just see, oh, rats got tumors when they got radiation that was similar to...
It's cherry picking. You're cherry picking a title and this.
It's not even cherry picking. It's different, I would say, because the data's there. Yeah, it's a little bit of cherry picking, but it's more misunderstanding. It's more misinterpreting the data and the information. And you see this with, there was another graph that showed the amount of radiation in being absorbed by the brain, but there was a whole issue with the person didn't actually do their calculations correctly in the graph that shows it's a whole thing. I'm not even gonna go into it. People misinterpret data and biological processes very poorly, so be really careful when you're looking at studies and when you're reading articles. Read them through all the way. It's very important.
Right. Please don't just read the titles. I promise.
That's going to do it for us today. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and especially share it. It takes literal seconds to hit subscribe and click the 5-star review button, and it would mean a whole lot to us. Positive ratings and shares on social media are the biggest ways you can help us spread this good science to even more people. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Just Nat Science. You can also visit our website, justnatscience.com, where you can watch YouTube videos, read blog posts, or submit questions and suggest topics for future episodes.
And don't forget, we put out new episodes every Tuesday. And as always, thanks again for listening, guys.
Later, you nerd.
Later, gators.